All right, we will be starting chapter 6, the ecstasy of community. So let me pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you that you have drawn us to yourself as individuals and together to be part of your body. Help us, Lord, in this time through discussions and thoughts and prayers to see your hand and to hear your call more nearly and clearly through our senses and together as your body. In Christ's name we pray. Amen. Okay, so as we are just first starting to look at this chapter, one thing that I would like to point out is the etymology, in a sense, of ecstasy. So ecstasy comes from the Greek ekstasis. The prefix ex means out of, and stasis is that which exists, that which already is, yourself, your body perhaps. So the kind of literal wooden explanation of ecstasy is outside of oneself. All right, outside of your current being. When we think of ecstasy, we're typically, I think, relating it to a feeling or experience, some sense of either unearthly pleasure or something that just seems sort of an overwhelming sort of sensual, positive, typically, feeling. And in essence, the word is basically suggesting something that pulls you outside of yourself. Some kind of response that's so overwhelming, it's like almost your own body and mind is not enough to contain it. And so you're just, I blew my mind, or that out of body experience perhaps, but a sense of it is outside of oneself or one's nature or one's standard mode of being. So to consider the ecstasy of community, I think there's kind of a few things potentially at play, not just an overwhelming sense of pleasure, but also in the acknowledgement that it means to be outside of oneself. And kind of the only way to do that is in some sense of community with others, with another, not being just in yourself. So anyway, just some of the terminology, I think, having these sort of underlying and multiple meanings, and sometimes it's for a reason. So we start off the chapter, and there's actually quite a bit about physical senses and sensations. Before we move into the practical and even the theological application, we get a lot actually of both observational stuff about, smelling and hearing and seeing and all that kind of stuff. And then that kind of underlying medical explanation about what's happening biochemically and anatomically and scientifically. So how does this chapter first start out?
Talking about figs.
Yeah, figs.
Right.
Figs. So he's outside, and it's just sort of a warm lounge around summer day, and he's out in, he's outside, and there's kind of a garden, and he's got a fig tree, and apparently it's doing really, really well. And he has learned over the years the secret of finding the best figs, and I thought that was kind of fun. And that's just a purely observational thing. But what's his secret? The butterflies, watching the butterflies. Okay. So the butterflies know better than he does. Yeah. But even beyond that, what about the butterflies? Because he's like deduced that they ignore the ones that aren't ripe enough at all, and they really like the ones that are a little overripe. And so there's kind of this where his preference, it's kind of an in-between thing. So he's watching the butterflies so carefully. He's watching the ones that they go to and linger for a second, but they don't stay at. So if they ignore it, they're not ripe. And if they sit there, they try to suck it dry, it's probably too ripe. So he's actually noticed this pattern of this kind of perfect sweet spot. And it's funny how fruit is like that. A lot of fruits have this little window. And not there yet, and too far gone for me.
Peaches, pears.
Peaches and pears, I think a real obvious observable example is bananas.
Oh, yes.
Nobody likes a green banana, unless you like plantains. And nobody wants a black banana unless you're making banana bread.
Yeah, yes.
So now there's people who will take those in betweens. Some people don't mind the spots or whatever, and I just don't like bananas, period. So I don't really care. But you can kind of see, you can go into a grocery store and look in the produce aisle, and you can see the bananas that just aren't going to make it. Like no one's going to pick that up in their cart because it's already too brown or it's got a bunch of big spots on it, and you will be, condemned to the island of misfit toys. No one's ever going to buy that halfway done banana.
Unless, like you said, you're going to make banana bread and then they work fine.
Well, they work fine, but I'm not sure there's many people who are going to get ripe bananas to make banana bread.
Well,
they just kind of find, oh, shucks, the banana that I thought was okay is not good. I'll use that one. We have we had a bunch of avocados. Hugh Coachman has a very prolific avocado tree, and he gave us like a bag full of them, and they were too hard. And he said, look, they're not ripe yet. Put them in like the windowsill, get some sun on them, but watch them. And sure enough, a few of them were on that windowsill just too long, and they turned like that. And I don't like avocados, so it didn't bother me. But all the girls who are really interested in those avocados had to start, like they all hit a good spot at the same time. So now we had a bunch of them that they had to, dig through really fast. Otherwise they were all going to spoil. And then once they kind of go too bad, forget it. Now I just saw somebody post this on a Facebook group. I've got one of those, if you grew up in Orlando Facebook groups, and they posted a close-up shot of I guess it's called a loquat. We always call them Japanese plums. And as a kid, I loved them. The big giant one in kind of the front corner of my home church. And there was a period of time, basically February, I think, when I would harvest them because nobody else wanted them, but I did. And they were little small things, and they're mostly seed. There's just a little bit of flesh around the seed. And they'd start off green, and then they get yellow, and then they go orange, and then they're brown and black. Apparently, everybody else in the world likes them orange because they get very sweet. I did not like them orange. I liked them yellow because when they were yellow, they were very tart, very sour, but that's what I liked. And so you could see in different parts of the tree where different ones were kind of slightly different colors and which ones I would want and which ones I wouldn't. And I would try to get them at just the right time. And if I missed it for some reason and I try to go back the next week, well, sure enough, now they're orange. Forget it. That's kind of a long digression into fruit ripeness to basically, kind of amplify his commentary. There is such a subtlety to it, but it's a subtlety that we perceive. Now, the butterflies were even better at it than he was. With their incredibly tiny little tongues, thinner than a thread, and they knew, they could sense it, they could smell it perhaps, whatever it was, And he's writing these things to kind of underline the remarkable precision and ability of our physical senses.
Even when we're not conscious of it.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and you know, there's not maybe a whole lot of distinction that you could tell from some of these fruits we've just been talking about, except for the fact that it makes a difference to us. And somehow we can not only tell the difference, we really have some pretty strong preferences about the difference. So he's, you know, and he kind of starts sliding over into smells and tastes and hearing.
I thought the part that he talked about a smell or a sound or whatever will bring back memory.
Yeah,
I thought that was in it because I've had that happen.
absolutely. There's the interesting thing about smell. I want to say I came across it somewhere that's one of the last senses to fade in your mortal life. And smell is so deeply evocative in our memory banks for some kind of unknown reason. And it's not every smell, but isn't it amazing how some smells it's like a keyword. You know, they take you back to a specific moment or a particular person or an era, and they do so without conscious thought. You don't have to be thinking about that person or that era, and the smell, you just sort of passively receive it, but bam, all of a sudden your brain is on fire about something you might not have thought about in decades. And it's funny that all of our senses have the opportunity to connect our brains and our memories, but there just seems to be something about smell. And I don't know if it's the passive nature of it. Smell it's, you know, basically invisible, and I don't know, kind of unexpected maybe. Like you don't see sound, but you can typically see where sound is coming from and know that it's happening, and smell can kind of take you unawares. I'm not sure how to best describe it, but that's why it feels so interesting to me that it connects us to these memories. Like you can go listen to something like a recording of a voice or a piece of music or something, and you kind of know that the sound is coming, or you know where the sound is coming from. But smells might just be a total surprise. But all of a sudden it's there, and now it's connected without you trying. So any particular smells that come to our minds?
Gingerbread.
Gingerbread, and that takes you back somewhere?
I liked gingerbread a lot as a child, and it wasn't something that we had real common like
Yeah.
that.
So this reminds you of childhood?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Holiday.
Holiday. So especially around Christmas. Yeah.
The smell of the Christmas tree in the house.
Yeah, I'm a sucker for that. That's basically why I've always resisted artificial trees.
Yeah.
Oops. Mary, I don't know how long they've been there, but Marion's here.
Uh-oh.
Sorry. Sorry, guys. I don't know how long you're waiting. I just now noticed. I really look forward to the start of the Christmas season, I guess. You know, basically anytime after Thanksgiving, and I will go to a tree lot and just walk around in the tent because of the smell. And when I don't have the chance to do that, I really miss it, and I feel like I'm in danger of missing something important.
Yeah, I've missed that since I can't do a real tree myself anymore. So I enjoy going to your house or Kim's house and smelling a real one.
Yeah. It's funny, over the years, it took a lot of false starts and some experimentation, but I finally found the brand of incense that reminded me of church as a child. And there's a lot of incense out there, and they've got some very different smells and strong smells, and kind of whether you like it or not, but it's a very unique smell, and it 100% reminded me, especially of high holy days. Like this is, Christmas at St. Mary of the Angels kind of stuff, because we didn't use it very much, and I don't now, but I was really happy when I finally found the one that really smelled like I think incense ought to smell like. And again, isn't it amazing that we are able to perceive such small little things, but then interpret so much information out of it. And he kind of ties in the, things like the animals that smell with a lot more precision than we do, and the bloodhound, and how they can take the one little tiny scent and track the criminal or whatever. And as amazing as that is, but just to think in a general sense, something that seems as passive as smelling, but how very profound and powerful it can wind up being. I make a true confession that my sense of smell has been dampened since the summer and COVID. I never lost it. Now, the boys, I think, complain that they lost their sense of smell and then they got it back. And I never lost it, and I can smell now, but it's just not as strong. It's not as accurate. It's not as full as it used to be. And I hope that, we'll come back. I'm sure I've adjusted to it at some level, but that's one of the kind of the current watch symptoms these days. Oh, if you lose your sense of smell, be very concerned. Go get a test or whatever it might be. How often do we think of our sense of smell?
I think you're right, because I think it's related to the fact that it is such a passive thing.
Yeah.
On occasion, we deliberately go to smell something like a perfume or a flower, but most of it, we just take it in because we have to
This
breathe.
chapter wasn't smell.
Right.
Yeah. For seeing, hearing.
Tom, there was some smell in there. We're working through our senses one at a time.
You're working through what?
We're working through our senses one at a time.
Oh, all right.
It started off with smell, but most of it was hearing, but we're getting there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Almost all the other senses, you are deliberately trying to take in that information.
Yeah.
Some of it is in the background, like noises that you're not trying to hear. But I think the sense of smell, because you have to breathe all the time.
Right.
And it's just there. Sometimes you might want to escape it.
Yeah, and you kind of can't, or
Right.
or you don't notice it until it's upon you, and you wish it wasn't.
Right.
But that you called it something or other, and I forget what it was. But in the commercials for Febreze, I think they call it nose blindness, where you stop noticing certain things, and that is 100% true.
Yes, it is.
Even in very distinct environments, the fish market or whatever, you do enough of it and you stop paying attention. It doesn't mean it's not there anymore, but it's like your brain has just sort of said, okay, I got it. You don't have to give me any more. And it's on the shelf. I remember very distinctly, for many years, we didn't have a dog growing up. But our neighbor did, and it was a long-haired dog, and walking into their house, it just, to me, everything smelled very strongly of dog. Now, I think some of that was unique to the circumstances, but I certainly can't tell if my house smells like dog because I've just had dogs for a long time. And I don't know to what degree it just, oh yeah, there's a dog in here versus like, whoa, there's dogs.
I had one visit for a week just recently, and I wanted to ask somebody, after we'd just given him a good bath, I could still get that dog smell.
Yeah.
What is it?
To this day, I'm very sensitive to cigarette smoke.
Oh, mhm.
My dad always tried to be pretty good about it. He would smoke outside, never in the house, but often in his car. Oh, but the window's down. Yeah, but
Still there.
yeah. So, but it just kind of lingered, and, to this day, I can pick it out and it's very striking to me. To me, it's very unpleasant. I hate it. It gives me a headache, but in what might not bother other people, 100% I can tell every single time. Somebody's a smoker, or they were just smoking, or somebody was in this area smoking, and I can pick it right out.
I can smell gas anywhere.
Gas, yeah.
From a mile away.
Yeah, and that's and it's funny how we've got different things that we might be particularly attuned to or sensitive toward. And again, the fact that our noses and these handful of cells and our brains can put all this information together.
And something I was going to ask you a minute ago. You said you lost your sense of smell. Did you also lose your taste? Because those are so connected.
Sure, yeah, and I'll talk about that some. I would say I didn't lose my smell enough that I could tell it was affecting my taste. So I never felt like I lost my smell. I just had to notice after the fact I wasn't smelling things that I thought I ought to be able to smell. So that tells me that it wasn't like a profound loss because I had to figure it out. But I still think it's there. All right, Tom, we're going to stop talking about smell and we're going to talk about hearing now. You ready?
Well, I had one comment about smell.
Yeah.
My former wife smoked since she was a teenager.
Yeah.
And then suddenly one day she stopped. And after that, she could not tolerate being in a room where there was smoke, cigarette smoke.
Yeah.
I don't know why that happened, but that
And
was
probably was
experience.
more sensitive to it than anyone else.
I don't know.
Yeah, that's
Well, I have always had a problem around smoke. I can't. I don't like it.
yeah. The thing and it's for me it's cigarette smoke because
Yeah, cigarette
I like
smoke.
smoke like campfire smoke because I love
Yeah.
that. But
Yeah, I'm
there's something
talking about cigarette
like
smoke.
tobacco, cigarette smoke. I don't like pipe smoke either, but it smells very different to me. Cigars, I don't like it, but it smells very different. Cigarettes have their own unique little something that I don't like. I don't know. It's
Well,
nice, but I can tell the difference.
pipe smokers have a variety of aromas that are added to the tobaccos to make them more appealing. I think that's the reason.
Yeah, I guess so. Okay, so moving from smell, we also kind of got our taste in there, which is a couple of his major sections. But let's get to hearing for a second because it really is very interesting, and I think it's also sort of indicative of the sensitivity of the other senses as well. But we have a way to describe it that we might be able to apply in other ways. So again, we're talking about these three tiny bones, the tiniest bones in the body, and they vibrate. And those vibrations send signals, and our brain interprets those signals, and we hear. And it truly is amazing. Now I have some I would describe as very, very light, low level tinnitus. which probably comes from my wayward youth as a drummer. But I don't typically notice it unless I'm in a very quiet environment. And in a quiet environment, my ears try to compensate, I guess, and I'll start hearing things, ringing maybe, or vibration. And in a general sense, it's nothing. It doesn't bother me a bit. But to imagine the ability of those bones, tiny little bones vibrating, and that was cool too, that the bones are the same size when we were born.
Yeah.
They haven't changed. And then our brain interpreting those vibrations and hearing what seems like limitless combinations and nuance of sound. So I was, for about a semester, working on a minor in music theory before I decided I didn't want to do that anymore. I was taking some classes I enjoyed and it was interesting, but then it just got to be too much. And one of the sections, it was very interesting, but I didn't particularly care for it, was the kind of the mathematical and the physics base of acoustics. So we were getting these formulas of vibrational cycles and how that worked on things like scales. And so he mentions, where is it here? The molecules are oscillating 256 times a second, and we interpret that as the note middle C. You can hear from a tuning fork, or you can hear from an instrument, or somebody can sing it. And it's pretty interesting when you can see the math and the physics behind it. But something that I've never understood the math or physics behind, and I don't know how you would even do it, but it makes all the difference in the world, is not what they would refer to as tone or intensity. It's the third quality of sound or music, timbre. Timbre is what they might call a tone color. So that 256 cycles a second of middle C, the sound waves are coming at that same rate if it's middle C, regardless of what's causing those vibrations. But 100%, we can tell between the middle C of a violin and the middle C of a piano and the middle C of someone singing it and the middle C of somebody else singing it. So the fact that our brains can distinguish with such amazing nuance what's, roughly, I mean, not even roughly, but with a lot of precision, vibrating at the same frequency, but all this other contextualized information about it, and we can pick it out. And when we can't pick it out, it's frustrating. In a crowd of people, when somebody says our name and we turn around and it's not us, or it's not for us, or it's not the person we thought it was, we're embarrassed, or we're surprised, or we're frustrated. Because we sort of assume we should be able to tell the difference. That's how, and I say that because we're just so good at it. Everybody. We know a friend's voice as their voice. Someone else who looks very similar and who says the exact same words, it doesn't sound the same.
Well, it's not necessarily the same tone. You mentioned that middle C
Right.
from different sources sounds different. I don't understand why that would be. I don't understand this timbre element that you mentioned.
Yeah. So timbre, or the color, is the other information that I see. And I don't know the physics behind it, but it's referred to as tone color or musical color, which basically says It's the rest of the stuff around the vibrating cycles that gives dimensions to a noise that makes it distinguishable. So, you know, not only can you tell the difference between a middle C and a piano and a middle C that somebody sings, you can tell the difference between a middle C on one piano versus another piano.
Well, when an orchestra tunes up, I think they all tune to a certain note, don't they?
Aha. And that's where you'd be wrong, because different instruments are pitched off of a different scale. So for instance, when an orchestra warms up and they say, well, we're going to play a B, you have to know, is that a natural B or what they refer to as concert B? Because my instrument, if it's tuned differently than yours, when you say concert B, I'm actually playing a different note. But it's going to sound in a group like we're all playing the same note. But even playing the same note, you can tell the difference between a clarinet and a flute. There's something about, like, even if they're both trying to play a middle C, there's something about just the overall quality of it that's got nuance, and the same thing that, you know, people's voices are slightly different, or you know, different sounds that you would assume kind of come from a similar origin, but we can pick them out and we can distinguish between them. There are animals that have a higher degree of hearing sensitivity than we do.
Oh, yes.
But one of the things that humans do as well or better than any other animal, and I think this has to do with something about the shape and configuration of our ears. We can pick out with a huge degree of accuracy the direction of sound. We know when something's behind us or slightly to the side or in front of us, and roughly how far away it is, in ways that animals don't. They can hear fainter sounds better, but we can place them better.
I think age may be the answer. I've noticed that I can't.
Age, you can't quite tell where stuff was.
direction.
Yeah, I'm sure that's a part of it, is that as we grow older, some of our sensitivities to things change. There's a tone that's popular in certain areas for discouraging teenagers from congregating. And they found, like in other countries and stuff, that when they play this tone, it's audible to people under a certain age, and you sort of lose the ability to hear it after you get about 30 years old or so. And so I want to say, you know, like play it like Japan or something, and they would play it in places where they were having like kids hang out and they didn't want them to hang out. And so it's funny to think that there's kind of a, and it's sort of expected. It's not just like this rare group of people, but for the most part, everyone loses this ability at a certain time. I have a high degree of sensitivity to certain frequencies that are both very low and very high. I can hear electronic hum when it seems like nobody else can. I can tell when a TV is on from across the room, even if the screen is black, because I can hear the very, and to me it sounds almost like a staticky sound. One of them I got from my dad, I'm pretty sure, because he always complained about it. I can hear running water like nobody's business.
Yes.
From across a house, I can tell if the toilet is running, and I can't not hear it. So the good news is we don't tend to have toilets overflow in our house, because I can tell and I can hear it from across. Oh my gosh, that thing hasn't stopped filling yet. And no, everyone else is just sort of walking around like, oh, I didn't know, I couldn't tell. But it's like somebody screaming at me. But, you know, again, this is that amazing and remarkable diversity and ability we don't pay too much attention to. But if we could, if we did, we would just be perpetually amazed.
Do you understand what causes a degeneration of hearing with age?
No, I would assume it's just like a lot of things. It's what we would refer to as wear and tear. You know, as things are used over a period of time, they wear out, or they lose their ability to work with the precision that they used to have, like a tool or a part might wear down through use, but I don't actually know.
Good question. I'd like to know the answer to that one too.
But that was interesting though, because it did bring back that thought that I'd come across that somewhere, that smell was one of the last sensations for people to lose. I learned it in the context of hospital visitations, where you know, people who seemed like they were losing their abilities to interact or to understand their surroundings, what could they still respond to? And we've all probably heard, you know, about speaking to someone who is unconscious.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead and speak to them because they can still hear you. And some of that we assume, but we don't know. But apparently, you know, as our eyesight's dim or as our ability to hear lessens, smell doesn't maybe wear out in the same way or as profoundly. And so that was one of the things we were told, is that, again, with its mysterious connection to our memories that can be so strong, don't be surprised that person in a hospital bed responding to a smell and responding in a, you know, in a very significant way because it made a big difference to them. But again, I've seen a lot of strange things in hospital beds. I've seen people who seemed completely unaware of their surroundings and fully unconscious. And we started saying something very familiar like the Lord's Prayer, and 1,000,000% they responded. They start moving their mouths. They start trying to say it, or they are saying it very, you know, quietly to themselves. You kind of don't know what connections are still there, but sometimes you can see it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This was, I thought, another one of those really interesting chapters where he's bringing so much medical knowledge to bear, and a lot of stuff that I either didn't know or I didn't combine in such a way to sort of see some of the wonder about it.
Right.
And you know, he mentions this video made from progressive MRIs of a developing fetus, and just how, if you've seen such pictures, especially as our technological ability advances and we can see more and more detail, how truly incredible that is when you consider, you know, that fertilized egg from the beginning is basically a single cell.
Yeah, right.
And from that homogeneous cell, not only comes the billions or trillions of cells of an adult, but all of those very super specialized and specific ones that we've been reading about for the last few chapters.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And that even whether it is unconscious, subconscious, transconscious, the way that our senses evoke behavior, connect us to things. We've talked about memories quite a bit, and he talks about things, almost these autonomic responses, like the baby's ability to suck, and then talks about the salmon swimming back to the place where their parents spawned that they've never been to. but the way that these senses are working in us and even on us in ways that we probably just don't realize at all, but it becomes completely essential.
Yeah.
What else? Now, I'm assuming we're going to close off in a minute with our talking about Abbe Pierre, but before we get there, which is, you know, kind of the way he wraps up this chapter, anything else about the stuff that we've talked about or we've read previous to that last section of the chapter?
No.
All right, well, let's talk about Abbe Pierre. So first of all, who was Abbe Pierre?
He had been a member of the nobility in what,
Okay.
France, I assume.
Yeah, born into a noble family in France.
And was this after the war, the First World War? I can't remember the timing of it.
Yeah, right. Yeah, kind of, he was in service during the war and then, you know, working afterward.
Right. And he was in, I guess, part of the governmental, like our Congress or something, and he got kind of fed up with things, and it sounds like he went into a monastery or was ordained.
Well, we have to actually back up for that.
All right, back up.
So Abbe Pierre was born into wealth and basically gave it all away and became a Catholic priest and a monk. And then everything else flows from there. His work in the French Resistance, his work in the government after the war, all that kind of stuff, I think comes out of
Yeah, I see it now.
that vocation. Which is not, you know, that I think in and of itself, that's a very material point. You know, here was a guy who didn't have to do any of this stuff, but very purposefully chose to let it go in order to take vows, lifelong sacramental vows of service to God. And I've met plenty of priests in my life, Catholic and otherwise. But if you happen to know any monks, I know a few. I've met a few. And monks are just like kind of a different breed. You know, that the very overt and purposeful renunciation of a lot of the stuff we take for granted. It's like meeting the Amish. You know, it's like a different way of living in the world that they have purposefully chosen. And that's not to say that priests of various stripes don't do that as well, but it seems to me that it's a lot more obvious, if not more dramatic, in a monastic life where you are taking vows and promises that really shape not just the scope of your life, but like it shapes every single day.
And as a result of them narrowing like this, I would assume that their intensity increases.
Yeah, I would think so. You know, it's interesting. We, to take it back to senses for a second, we've all probably heard about, it's sort of an aphorism that if you lose one sense, the other senses kind of sharpen. I don't know if that is I don't know if that's a real physical reality, but I think it absolutely makes sense within our perceptions that if you can't use one sense, you start really relying on the others. And either you get really, really good at it or you're just paying a lot more attention to it.
Do you think the fact that you're relying more on it sharpens it?
Quite possibly. I mean, if, you know, most things tend to work that way, right? The more we concentrate on them, the better we get at them.
Yeah, right.
So in that monastic life, if you are narrowing the scope of that life into just a handful of things, it makes sense then that the intensity deepens
Mhm.
on those few things. And so for Abbé Pierre, it 100% looks to be service to the poor. So after helping the French resistance, who is his focus with through the governmental service and after the fact? It seems to be kind of singular.
The Parisians, the poor.
Yeah, basically the poor and homeless of Paris. And with a somewhat laser-like focus. And that's where I think Tom's point becomes real clear. You know, someone who has become so focused is then able to accomplish so much in that one field. And basically, it sounds like he eliminates homelessness in the city of Paris.
Well, he teaches them to do that thing, to narrow down and to have the most efficient.
Right. So instead of like having, 100,000 people pick through recyclables, they start working together, they start coordinating to the point where they're able to open a factory. And because of this community and this cooperation, all of them wind up doing better than they would have otherwise. But there's a fundamental principle that Abbé Pierre basically says is keeping us alive. And it's really, really interesting. What's the fundamental principle? Because this is the reason Abbé Pierre comes to visit Dr. Brand in the first place.
You have to help someone that's in worse shape than you are.
You've got to help someone in worse shape than you. And as soon as all of the homeless of Paris helped each other out sufficiently that they weren't so bad off as they were, they ran out of people in worse shape than them. And while that sounds like, frankly, sort of funny, but it almost sounds like a good problem to have. In the laser focus of Abbé Pierre, it was a terrible problem. Why?
And no one left to help.
It's just like if something is not used, it if a knife, if it's not used, gets dull,
Yes.
rust, corrodes. And these people had an intensity, and suddenly that intensity wasn't needed.
And it would deteriorate.
That's it, exactly.
Like a muscle that atrophies.
Right, that's it.
And this intensity, and it was an intensity born of love that sought out someone worse off than you. Now,
Yeah.
What's so specifically helpful about that? Almost to the point of it's almost like magic. Serving someone less well off than you.
Yeah, at the end, he says, we must serve or we die.
We must. I started thinking in that moment when I read that, like those sharks that have to keep swimming in order to live. If they're not moving forward, they don't get enough oxygen passing through their gills, and they'll actually drown. And
Never heard that.
so they,
Okay.
yeah, certain sharks have to be in constant motion. They even like move while they sleep. So, if we're not serving, we're going to die. And some of it's maybe a little poetic in the sense of, we will become an institution and we'll lose our abilities and so on and so forth. But there's something very, very practical and true about serving someone who is worse off than you. Can you describe that at all in personal experience?
I can't. Go ahead.
There's a dryness of life and a lack of feeling of blessedness if one is not feeding others because you're not feeding yourself if you're not feeding others.
Yeah. Yeah. If we have been built for community in the sense of we've been built to be connected to others, we've been built to serve, we've been built to love, that requires an object outside of ourselves. That the ecstasy that we started off talking about, ecstasis, out of oneself. Without that, to be withdrawn in one's self will only get smaller and smaller. What's bigger is to be outside of oneself, that ecstasis. I will put it in a very practical piece of advice that I was once given by someone who had very little good advice to give. This is a person that I was able to take very, very few positive things from. But I took this, and it's always been so very true. He said, whenever you're feeling sorry for yourself, whenever you're feeling bad about yourself or about your circumstances, I want you to pull out the church directory and find the biggest sad sack you can find. Give him a call and pray for him. And just watch and see what happens to your own mood.
Yeah.
And the reality is, when we serve someone who is worse off than us, you might think, oh, well, that's going to make you feel good because you're better. No, there's just something, it pulls you out of yourself. And in a way that doesn't allow you to sort of shrink into your own frustrations or worries or sadness. And I've got to say, as a practical piece of Christian virtue, try it the next time you're in a crummy mood. Try it the next time when you feel like the world's against you, or you just feel down or anxious, or like you can do no right. Go do something for someone who cannot pay it back because they're not in the shape to do that. And not only does it reprioritize ourselves and give us a little healthy perspective, but there's something almost magical, maybe mystical, maybe divine about demonstrating physically love for someone who can give you nothing in return.
And what's even better yet is when you can do it when you're not in that place.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. Don't wait until you just are in a rotten mood, but the thought of how powerful the effect that it can be on you, because in essence, maybe that's the way it's supposed to be. So if we can do it at any and all times, then we're doing what we ought. But when we don't do it and we sort of forget, there's a chance and a way to fix that. And that was kind of the story of Abbé Pierre. His homeless Parisians needed to find someone that they could serve. And through the lepers and the untouchables of India, he was excited to find out that there was a brand new mission for them, and people, that it would give them a purpose, it would give them a goal, it would give them the energy to take aim and to carry out, because that the energy underneath it and behind it and through it was love. And there was no more powerful energy source within humanity than the power of love, because that's how we've been built, by he who loved us first.
Yeah.
Okay, how are we? We good?
We're good.
Okay, well, I'll figure that was that chapter, and next week we will hit the next one. I know we had some people who weren't able to be here, so this will get uploaded probably later today. But next chapter, that'll be chapter 6, I believe, and we're going to be on a new section. We'll be in section 3, I think, right? right?
Great.
Am I on the right? Hang on.
Yeah, you're right.
No, we just finished chapter 6. We will be doing chapter 7, but that's a
Yeah,
new
that's-
part. It's part 3,
Part 3, Chapter 7.
chapter 7. Okay, I will see you guys
Okay.
next week then.
All righty.
Thank you.
Okay.
Have a
Bye.
good
Sorry we were late.
Well, it all worked out.